Hi, and welcome to this small course on hacking failure. I'm Shane Lester, the author of The Value of Failure. At the end of this course, you should be able to understand the major factors and why people don't learn from failures, and be able to remember the ACE framework and learn how it will help you hack failure. Nobody wants to fail, but stuff happens. The Failure Club is not exclusive. In fact, the only way not to fail is to not try. And in not trying, you may still fail. In a 2015 article from Forbes, they stated that 90% of all startups fail. The 10% that succeed make mistakes, but they learn from their failures. There are three key attributes of how successful people learn from their failures. First, successful people have learned when to pivot from their failures. If you can't do that, then you are stuck in a loop and you will fail again. They know when to give up and when to go forward. They know how to properly interpret a failure based upon what they know and have learned about themselves or their pursuits in life, and they make changes based upon new understanding. Second, they know what to learn to be successful. If you can evaluate and process a failure event, you can see what you lacked in terms of knowledge, skills, or attitudes that contributed to your failure. Once you realize this, you know what you need to do to learn to avoid future failures. Lastly, successful people know how they learn best. The higher the stakes, the sharper your mind becomes. Successful people know how to process information, and they know how their minds work best in learning mode. They also have awareness of the patterns within systems, people, and within themselves. They construct targeted, on-the-fly learning strategies for success. In other words, they are active learners and they don't waste time learning things that don't help them overcome a failure. Let me share a few samples of my research I've analyzed over the past year about how people can learn from their failures. John C. Maxwell is a leadership expert and author. In his book, Failing Forward, he outlines numerous examples that show how perceiving and responding to failure determines whether you will be an average or an achieving person. Maxwell's Failing Forward is a 15-step method to achieving success through and with failure. I won't go over all 15 steps here, but here are a few steps. Number 2, learn a new definition of failure. Here Maxwell is trying to help us understand that failure is a good and powerful learning mechanism. Number 4, take action and remove fear. One of the biggest problems is the stunning effect failure can have upon us. We should not wallow in failure too long. In fact, the longer you take to recover, the longer it will take you to be successful. Number 8, change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. The blame game is a game that winners don't play. Tim Harford is an English economist and journalist. In his book Adapt, he outlines 3 principles for productive failure. First, try new things. Expose yourself to lots of different ideas and try lots of different approaches on the grounds that failure is common. Then, experiment with where failure is survivable. Look for experimental approaches where there's lots to learn. Projects with small downsides but bigger upsides. Too often we take on projects where the cost of failure is prohibitive and just hope for the best. Lastly, recognize when you haven't succeeded. This third principle is the easiest to state and the hardest to stick to, but you must understand when you've failed. In my research for my book last year, I came up with a high-level framework for hacking failure. The observations from Harford and Maxwell fit nicely under my framework. So let's look at how you can hack failure and thus shortcut to success by following the ACE framework. The first element in the ACE framework is accountability. In order to take accountability for your failures, you need to understand the three psychological effects that can occur after a failure and then what you need to do to avoid them. First, avoid denial. It seems to be the hardest thing in the world to admit we've made a mistake. If you can't own a failure, then you can't make it right. The feeling of denial often occurs because of our erroneous definition of failure. No breakthrough in your life will occur if you remain in denial about your reality. Accepting losses. Worse than denial is to double down and to try to overcome the failure with more action and more effort, all pointed in the wrong direction. Harford gives this example of how poker players who've just lost some money are primed to make riskier bets than they would normally take in a hasty attempt to win the lost money back and erase the mistake. Self-serving life editing. The last effect happens when we mislabel our failure or try to paint it in a different shade in the effort to convince ourselves that the mistake doesn't matter or that it wasn't a failure in the first place. When we revise our own history, we are setting ourselves up to repeat our failures. If you can recognize these psychological effects, then you can begin to be accountable and then make correct reactions to failure. The second element in the ACE framework is creating a system for corrective action. I use the term creativity because we are all very creative in coming up with ways of preserving our bad behavior through faulty triggers and imperfect systems. The creativity I'm talking about is your ability to create a system that will allow you to learn from your failures and to fail successfully. The first step is to set up a learning system which is based upon your analysis of what you need to learn to avoid a failure. Systems or processes have the power to change your behavior. Research in behavior science is suggesting that curiosity is a key factor in changing your behavior. For this step, you need to set up a system that encourages curiosity and pattern recognition of current behaviors. This system will then lead you to target active learning experiences that address specific failures. Next, try new things. Failures are often the result of well-worn-in behavior patterns. You need to commit to trying new things to break these patterns and cycles. From a corporate perspective, Google has implemented this principle by trying different ideas and different approaches on the grounds that failure is common, and the more ideas you try, the better your odds of hitting a home run with one of them. Creating a safe space to fail. Failures can be private or they can be public based upon your role and position in life. In either case, you should create spaces that are conducive to learning. A safe learning space can negate the emotional effects of failure. Corporations that nurture failure and learning within the same framework can truly hack failure and shortcut to success. The last element in the ACE framework is evaluating and learning from your failures. First, gather feedback. If you think you're doing okay, but the feedback suggests otherwise, this becomes an invitation to a failure analysis. In fact, most people live in failure because they don't seek nor observe feedback cues. Feedback is essential for learning. In terms of projects or work initiatives, feedback will help you determine which experiments have succeeded and which have failed. Get feedback often and from more than one person. Next, remove emotions from the equation. It's important to be dispassionate at times about the feedback you receive or perceive. Failure can stir up emotions. At times, you need to look beyond the words of feedback and see it in context. The key driver in getting feedback and removing emotion is to remember that regardless of how bad things are or how bad you perceive them to be, you are winning because you know the truth, and the cost and the benefits of moving forward are worth paying. Don't get too attached to your plan. We sometimes spend a lot of energy planning and hoping. The seductive nature of planning is that we tend to think plans mitigate all risk and all failure. The Titanic comes to mind. Mike Tyson said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." Experiment where failure is survivable. If you need to learn a new skill, try it out in an environment that is safe and the risk of getting it wrong is low. For example, if you need to improve your persuasion skills, try to persuade a close friend first and then refine your skills before you try to persuade the CEO. This level of practice will increase your ability to perform in real situations. Our aptitude to learn is the key factor in our ability to overcome a failure. Remember, failure only persists because we do not learn. The last step, commit only to what is working. If you felt the effects of failure and you owned it, and if you learned from it, you should be applying new skills, knowledge, or attitudes. As a result, you should see changes in your behavior. If these new skills or knowledge are working, then go down the path and succeed. If you fail again, start the ACE process over. Successful people have to try a lot of things, but when you find a lever that works, then move quickly and replicate. In fact, startups that find a market and grow to meet demand are in the 10% that succeed. I hope you've enjoyed this training. Please like, share, and sign up for special content from my blog, Learning from Your Failures. Also, check out my new book, The Value of Failure, exclusively available at Amazon.com. Let me share a little bit about this book. The Value of Failure is an unconventional book that will give you insights into the nature of failure and help you learn how to pivot your life back on track. This book started as a personal experiment. I took all of the self-help advice that I could find, and I conducted an experiment to see if I could change my life over a year and be more successful. What I discovered is that you need to stop looking for failure to lead to success. Look at failure for what it really is, a nebulous state that may or may not be a result of your efforts and may or may not lead you to something better. Remember, after you fail, it matters what you think, feel, and do about your current state. All of these are definable if you know how to intellectually and emotionally process a failure event. This book might change everything you thought you knew about failure. Well, thanks again, and best of luck in your efforts in hacking failure.